Hi, this is Lawrence Fleckenbill. You are listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson with a reminder that we'll bring you an encore presentation of a conversation with Tony Award-winning actress Dinah Manoff later on in this hour. We hope you stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we'll begin our second hour by playing part two of a conversation that began last week with Peter Ford. Peter Ford, son of Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell. Glenn Ford was once described as the best actor never to win an Academy Award. This despite the fact that Glenn Ford continues to be recognized by movie scholars and moviegoers alike as one of the finest actors the motion picture industry has ever known. Peter's book includes exclusive interviews with dozens of Glenn Ford's co-stars, including Ernest Borgnine, Sidney Poitier, Debbie Reynolds, Shirley Jones, Carl Reiner, and Angela Lansbury, as well as such directors as Vincent Sherman, Delbert Mann, and Richard Donner. Glenn Ford Alive, available wherever books are sold through University of Wisconsin Press. You can also find Peter Ford Alive at Amazon.com, wherever books are sold online. For more on Peter, peterford.com. Speaking of Richard Donner, you'll remember from part one of our conversation with Peter Ford that Richard Donner not only directed Peter in an episode of Mr. Novak that originally aired circa 1963, but became friends with both Peter and Glenn Ford. As a result of that experience, fast forward about 7 or 8 years, Richard Donner was one of the directors that Glenn Ford hired when he did his television series Cade's County for CBS in 1971, and who later directed Glenn Ford in the original Superman in 1978. As we pick up the conversation, George Marshall was one of the directors who worked with your dad on Cade's County, and he had a history with them, and the fact that he worked with a lot of old friends, that was another reason that made that show very enjoyable for him.
Yes, no, absolutely the case. I guess Dad, he was a pretty big star in those days, and so he could ask who he wanted. And he had a lot of directors. I was saying to you, I worked with Leo Penn was one of the directors.
Leo Penn as in father of Sean Penn.
Sean Penn's father,
yeah.
Right. And so a lot of them were there that Dad had worked with. And a lot of actresses, too, Barbara Rush and Broderick Crawford was in one, and different people who Dad had worked with. So he brought in a lot of big name people to the show. And as I say, it's really sad that the show didn't prosper. You had mentioned earlier, not only was my father never did win an Academy Award, he never was nominated.
Yeah.
And I know he was the top star in 1958. He was I guess the Tom Cruise of 1958. Through the mid-50s, 56, 57, 58, and those years, he was either number one or he was certainly in the top 10, and he was never, ever nominated for an Academy Award. It's unbelievable, really, because he's such a skilled actor. It's very strange.
Glenn Ford Alive, available Amazon.com, wherever books are sold online. Now, as I remember correctly, after Cade's County left the air, but before you went into law enforcement yourself, you continue to act occasionally, and one thing led to another, and you got on the radar of the Quinn Martin casting people, and you did at least 2 Quinn Martin shows. I know you did a Cannon, and you did a couple of Barnaby Joneses.
Yeah, in fact, the Barnaby Jones, that's what I think I mentioned to you about that I did this Barnaby Jones, and I was a drug dealer, supposedly,
mm-hmm.
and I flew a plane, and I landed the plane. Of course, this is not, I didn't actually do this, but this is the idea. And I landed this plane, and so they had this plane parked, was moored, and the prop was going as if I had just landed. So I got out of the plane, and I walk around the wing, and I'm having a conversation with the guy who's going to receive the drugs that I had brought in by air. And the actor is James Woods.
Yes.
But he kind of knows today. He was in the onion field,
mm-hmm.
and he's been quite prominent recently in the news.
Mm-hmm.
And so the camera is on me over Jim's shoulder with the plane behind me, if you can envision this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm having this dialogue with Jimmy Woods, and we're talking about the drug shipment, and the next thing I know, Jim's, the camera's, it's my close-up, or at least, it's an over-the-shoulder on me, over Jim's shoulder, and so the next thing I know, Jim's grabbing me and throwing me down, and within seconds, the plane came over me. I felt the prop come right near me.
Wow.
The plane on the ground, and Jim's on the ground, and the plane taxis into the camera equipment, and it tears up the Mitchell camera and the boom mic and the whole thing, the lights, And nobody was hurt, but I said to Jimmy at the time, I said, "Oh my God, if you had not," of course he's looking at the plane, he sees it coming toward my back, and I said, "Jimmy, if you had pushed me down, I would have been a dead duck," So we of course broke for the day, but that episode, I think it aired in October of '76, and it was called something, I forget.
Sins of Thy Father.
Sins of Thy Father, that's it. And after that, I came on. I said to Linda, I don't think I'm meant for this business. And it was about that point that I got busy in my new life. And that's when I thought it's safer to build houses and to be on the TV. And I wasn't making that much money. And my wife she had gotten her master's degree, and she was teaching. And I got her into the Screen Extras Guild, and she was in a lot of stuff. She played Harrison Ford's wife in a miniseries, and she was in Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno and all that stuff during those days. And and I said to myself, you know what, I can't. She's working all the time, and I'm working like once a month. And I said, and I don't mind having her making more money than me. It's just I just wasn't pulling my weight. So that's when I decided to become a building contractor, and that's a whole another life that I stepped into and did quite well in.
And another chapter of your life where you not only built homes for people like you and me, but you occasionally you had some celebrity clients, didn't you?
I did, yes. I did. I built a house for Steve Tisch, who did, I think it was Tisch Abnett. They produced Risky Business, and the Tisch family, of course, they're the Tisches of New York, and they own hotels and stuff. And but I did that. I did a house for Don Simpson, who did Beverly Hills Cop. With speaking of which, with I think Tom Cruise was in there, or Top Gun rather. And but he did Beverly Hills Cop too. And I did a lot of houses. I built a house for Blake Edwards, the director, and I did quite a bit of celebrity houses. And I think I told you I bought George Clooney's house. So,
yes.
And that was for me a project that I wanted to do. But he was a nobody at that time. But I bought his house, and that was an interesting little bit of business that happened there.
Yes, you found one of the things you were doing is you're clearing out the place and and getting ready to renovate it. You found a box of old photographs, including a photo of him and Kelly Preston.
Kelly Preston, who ended up marrying John Travolta. Yeah, I at the time, I don't know what year would this have been. This is like, I don't know. At the time, it might have been mid '80s. So he had a pot-bellied Vietnamese pig as his pet, or they were together at that time before she married Travolta. But they had it was known as the Pig House. I later learned in the neighborhood, but it was Clooney and Kelly Preston. Anyway, I found I ended up tearing that house down and making what today that people are into architecture and stuff. It's the craftsman style, like the green houses in Pasadena, and it's a style that I really, really loved. And I designed this house and built it where Clooney's house was. Well, anyway, Clooney at the time, I'd never heard of him, and he was a nobody, which is fine. Except I'm finding these photos, and I would just let me just say, if they were revealing. And it's nothing that you, as a man, would want to have published.
No.
So, but I didn't know who they were. But I later learned who they were, and I thought, oh my God, what a, But that wouldn't have been my style to do anything with them. But I could have made a lot of money with those photographs. Let me just say that.
Well, yes, but had you not been raised with the kind of moral fiber that you learned from your mom, especially, No,
I threw them out.
Exactly.
I thought later when I realized who the heck this guy became, I thought, whoa. So anyway, I could have been retired in Tahiti.
No, that was back when George was known as Nick's son. George's father, Nick Clooney, was a very major, very prominent interviewer in Cincinnati, and also he did some stuff for the ABC National Network as well.
Yeah, no, I know. It's interesting. Yeah, I built a house. I just bragging a little bit. Forgive me for doing this, but I built a house for Frank Gehry. Now, people might not know who Frank Gehry is, but I encourage you to look him up. He won the Pritzker Prize. He's a very, very famous architect. Mm-hmm. He and E.M. Pye and some of these others are... Anyway, quite interesting. Gehry did the museum in Bilbao, Spain, and anyway, I built a house for Frank Gehry that the New York Times said was one of the most important, one of the 10 most important contemporary houses built in the United States in the last century. So it was for Schnabel. I don't know if one went online and looked up the Schnabel house, but it's a very famous house that I built for Mr. Schnabel, Rock Schnabel. He was our ambassador to Finland at the time, as I believe. And but Frank Gehry was quite an architect, and I also did a house for him for Sally Kellerman. Speaking of people in the show business, who was, of course, in MASH.
Peter Ford is on the line with us. Peter Ford, son of Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell. Peter Ford, also author of Glenn Ford, A Life, an intimate look at the life and times of one of our finest screen actors. Glenn Ford, A Life, available wherever books are sold. Also available Amazon.com. You can follow Peter, peterford.com.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. Tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
Hi, this is Jim Peck, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
When you quote-unquote build or rebuild a house for a celebrity, I mean, I'm guessing that, they approach it no differently than anybody else. They'll say, okay, Peter, this is what we want to do, and this is an idea of how much we want to do it in. And, you work with them and you come up with a design or a blueprint that works for them, and then once they sign off, then you get off to work.
Right. In most of the cases, like with Blake Edwards and others, I did a house for Mary Kay Place. I don't know if any. Mary
Hartman. She wrote a lot of. She was also a very prominent singer and screenwriter for television.
But anyway, I would most of the time I would get the plans and I would bid the plan, and if they accepted my bid to do it, I was committed for that, to do it at that price, and I never had a problem. I always had a very good business. Unfortunately. What happened was when my father lived to be age 90, and he passed in 2006, and in the early 90s, when he's 80-something, like my age, he decides he wants to get married again. And I said to my wife at the time, and we have 3 children now, and at that time we had 3, and I said, you know what, I can keep building, and I was a sole proprietor at that time. I had 13 employees, and it's if you know about the building business and you're dedicated as I was, it was a 60, 70-hour-a-week job. And I said, if my dad gets married again, he's going to get divorced again, and this is going to be a lot of pain. So we decided. I said, you know what, I'm gonna retire and quit. And I did some small jobs, but we basically moved in to take care of him, protect him from himself, because he was always in love with somebody, and so we ended up living with him until he passed. And I was doing some small jobs, but nothing big. But it was I felt it was my duty to take care of him, because he raised me, and so he needed help, and there we were.
Yes, as you share with your readers throughout the pages of Glenn Ford A Life, okay, yes, you did not, your relationship with your dad was not always an easy relationship early on, but as you grew older, and as you both came to understand each other, you really had, in many respects, you were each other's best friends. And so,
right. That wasn't father-son, it was friends, so.
Yeah. And with that in mind, you wanted to look out for your dad because you cared about him. You genuinely cared about him, and that's why you took the time to be his caretaker in the final years of his life.
Yeah, my mom passed when she was only 69, very young, and so I had one parent left, and I thought, well, if I'm able to do it, I should take care of him. And as it turned out, he stopped working a long time before, and he had his pension. He was in the Navy Reserve. He retired as a captain in the Navy, so he had the Navy pension. He had his Social Security, and then he had his Screen Actors Guild and his AFTRA pension. But, with all of that, he was basically not, he needed help. So I hired, we had round-the-clock nursing taking care of him toward the end, and boy, believe me, that's not cheap. And so I don't know what his income was at the time. I think I'm going to guess maybe $70,000, which is not bad for not working, but he had all of his pensions and stuff, and he had made good money in his day. But toward the end, his expenses far outpaced his income. So Linda and I started paying for everything, and because I had saved, I've always been very conservative, and we saved our money. But when he died, broke, because he was fleeced. I didn't get into it in great detail in the book, but I tell you, everybody took advantage of him. He was very trusting, and boy, I tell you, they stole from him left and right. And but when he died broke, we were broke.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the house being in Beverly Hills and being where it was, right behind the Beverly Hills Hotel, was worth quite a lot of money. And being the only child, the house went to me, and we were able to sell it and bail ourselves out. But it was a very interesting time in those days. And when he died, I had to pay a death tax. And of course, we didn't have any money, and the government came in and decided that we had to pay. Well, it was almost $1 million in death tax because of the value of the house, and it was quite something. So I had to go borrow the money to pay the stupid government death tax. I don't think they have that anymore right now, but boy, that was brutal. And anyway, it took a while to unshovel ourselves out of that quagmire, but we ended up being okay finally at the end. But boy, it was an interesting time.
Glenn Ford A Life is the poignant story of Peter's relationship with his dad, and also traces the life and career of his dad, and includes many exclusive interviews with many of Glenn Ford's co-stars, including Ernest Borgnine, Sidney Poitier, speaking of Blackboard Jungle, Evelyn Keyes, Debbie Reynolds, Shirley Jones, James Whitmore, Carl Reiner, many, many others, as well as such directors as Vince Sherman, Delbert Mann, and Richard Donner. Glenn Ford A Life, available wherever books are sold, as well as Amazon.com. You can follow Peter, peterford.com. Okay, now let me just ask you this question before we wrap our conversation. Now, you, in many respects, you were a child of Hollywood, and simply because of your mom and your dad, you knew a lot of famous people, so it was not uncommon for you to have people like Johnny Weissmuller over at your house, or to learn golf from Ben Hogan, because that's who your dad was golfing with. So, Hollywood, Beverly Hills, that's part of your blood, but in recent years, you decided to leave Hollywood, and you're now in Montana. What led you to move to Montana?
Well, we knew we wanted to get out of California, so we our two sons are there. Our daughter is up here with us in Montana. But I don't know. I've always wanted to be. I like trees, quiet, and so we looked everywhere. We went to Idaho. We went to Washington State. We looked in Jackson, Wyoming, and we ended up coming up here, and I just fell in love with it. So we have 25 wooded acres. I'm looking out the window right now at probably 5,000 trees that we own because they're on our property. And so we have 5 deer that come out every morning. They for their morning feed. I know you're not supposed to feed them, but we don't shoot them. I couldn't kill a deer if I had to. But so we feed them, and they're like our house pets, but they're living outside. So it's quite nice. We see foxes, and I've seen some bears out in the backyard, and deer, and it's like it's just so peaceful, Eddie. It's so wonderful. I'll tell you the truth. I like it a lot up here.
Well, speaking writer to writer, it sounds like a good environment if you do decide to write a book on your mom's life, or whatever you decide to embark on. It sounds like a very idyllic place for a writer to live because it's quiet and allows you to think and process your thoughts.
Absolutely is. It's just wonderful.
Well, it's been a long time since you last visited our program. I hope we don't let another 14 years lapse. And if you do decide to do a book on your mom, let us know. In the meantime, it's always a pleasure to chat with you on and off, Mike. Peter Ford, and I look forward to our next conversation.
All right, Ed. Thank you very much. God bless you and all your listeners.
Glenn Ford, A Life, available wherever books are sold through University of Wisconsin Press. You can also find it at Amazon.com, wherever books are sold online. For more on Peter Ford, peterford.com.
Who needs a vacation? Are you ready for an unforgettable getaway? Start packing your bags because Branson, Missouri, the vacation and entertainment capital of the U.S., is calling your name. For just $99 per person, here's what you get. A full 3-day, 2-night stay in a luxury resort hotel, a delicious full breakfast buffet every morning you're here, and when you call right now, free show tickets worth up to $100. That's right, free show tickets to an award-winning show on us. You don't have to leave the country for an amazing vacation. You can drive or fly to Branson and have an incredible time. Whether you bring in the whole family or just planning a romantic escape, this trip is built for you. We guarantee you'll love Branson. This is not a timeshare. It's just an unbeatable vacation deal for only $99 per person. You book now, you can use your tickets anytime this year. You don't even need to know your travel dates to lock in the special price. Hurry, because this offer won't last long. Call our Branson vacation experts today.
800-435-1887. 800-435-1887. 800-435-1887. That's 800-435-1887.